Every plane that has ever crashed left one survivor. It is not a person. That survivor is me. I am the flight recorder. I sit in the tail, I listen to everything, and I am built to walk out of the one moment nobody else does. People call me a black box. I have never been black. I am, and always have been, bright orange. I can survive being slammed into the ground at 3,400 times the force of gravity, then set on fire at 1,100 degrees Celsius, then sunk under 3 kilometers of ocean for 2 years. And when investigators finally open me up, the tiny board inside will tell them exactly how hundreds of people died, down to the last second. So what is actually inside me? Who built the first one? And why can a fist-sized box survive a crash that a 200-ton aircraft cannot? This is the story of the machine that outlives the disaster. What's actually inside a black box? Chapter 1. The man they told to stop. In 1934, a de Havilland airliner called the Miss Hobart fell into Bass Strait off the coast of Australia. 11 people died. The wreck was never found. The cause was never determined. On board was a minister named Hubert Warren. He left behind a 9-year-old son and one last gift, a small crystal radio set. That boy, David Warren, grew up to become a fuel scientist. And decades later, he sat on the panel investigating the world's first jetliner, the de Havilland Comet, as it fell out of the sky again and again with no explanation. Warren had a simple, radical thought. What if the cockpit could remember its own final minutes? What if the plane could testify? By 1956, he had built it, the ARL Flight Memory Unit. It stored 4 hours of cockpit voices and instrument readings on a loop of fine steel wire. Australia's response? The Air Force said it would yield, quote, more expletives than explanations. Civil aviation said it had little immediate use. Pilots feared being spied on. He was told to get back to fuel research. It took a visitor from Britain to see it. In 1958, a British official watched a demonstration, understood instantly, and flew Warren to London to show it off. The idea finally caught. Ironically, Australia became the first country on Earth to make cockpit voice recorders mandatory in 1960. The United States followed with data recorders, then voice recorders through the mid-1960s. The witness was now the law. He lost his father to a crash with no answers and spent his life making sure no family ever had to hear those words again. Cause unknown. When David Warren died, his coffin was labelled Flight Recorder Inventor. Do not open. Chapter 2. Why orange is called black. Here is the first myth, and it's about my own name. I am painted in a colour officially called International Orange, so searchers can spot me in wreckage, in mud, on the seafloor. So why black box? Nobody can prove it. The best documented answer is the least dramatic. In World War II, British crews called the secret electronic units in their aircraft black boxes. The phrase was already slang for a mysterious device you judge only by what goes in and what comes out. You'll hear it was named because fire turns it black. That one is folklore. The name existed long before anyone filmed a charred recorder. Orange came first. Black was just what engineers called a box they couldn't see inside. Chapter 3. Open me up. Now the part you came for. What is actually inside? And the surprise is how little of me actually matters. Most of my body is just electronics that do the recording in flight. In a crash, all of that is allowed to die. Only one part has to survive. This. The crash survivable memory unit. Everything else is packaging. The outer wall is stainless steel or titanium, about 1/4 of an inch thick. That's the skin that takes the impact and the crush. Inside that is a block of dry silica thermal insulation, a full inch of it. That's the layer that lets me sit in an 1100 degree fire for an hour while the memory in the middle stays cool enough to survive. And at the very center, wrapped in all that armor, is the only thing that actually matters. A small stack of solid-state memory chips, no moving parts, smaller than your hand. That is the real black box. The rest is a suit of armor built around it. How tough is that armor exactly? These are the certified numbers I have to pass before I'm allowed to fly. Impact. fired into a target at 3,400 times the force of gravity for 6.5 thousandths of a second. That's like hitting a wall at hundreds of miles an hour. Fire, 1100 degrees Celsius for a full hour, then a slow burn, 260 degrees for 10 hours, in case I'm buried in smouldering wreckage. Crush, 5,000 pounds of static force on every axis. Puncture, a 500-pound weight dropped onto a steel spike aimed straight at my heart. Pressure, held at the equivalent of 20,000 feet underwater. And then, after all of that, I have to be soaked in seawater for 30 days and still give up every bite. That is what survivable means. Not indestructible. Survivable. So here's the obvious question everyone asks. If this little box survives anything, why not build the whole plane out of it? Hold that thought. It's coming up, and the answer is beautiful. Chapter 4, what I actually hear. There are really two of me on every airliner. The first is the cockpit voice recorder. It listens. A microphone in the cockpit ceiling picks up everything. The pilot's words, the switches, the alarms, the engines, even the tone of a voice starting to break. Plus a channel for each crew member. Older recorders kept only the last 30 minutes, then 2 hours. New aircraft in Europe now keep a full 25 hours, and the United States is finally adopting the same. It runs on a loop, always erasing the oldest audio, which matters more than you'd think. The second recorder is the flight data recorder. It doesn't listen, it knows. The earliest ones tracked 5 things, then 11. Today, I'm required to record at least 88 parameters, and modern jets log well over 1,000. Altitude, airspeed, every control input, every engine reading, many times a second for 25 hours. And here's a detail most people miss. Both of us live back here, in the tail. Not because it's convenient, because in most crashes, the tail is the last part to hit, and the furthest from the fuel and the fire. Where I sit is a survival decision. Chapter 5, how to find a box on the seafloor. But surviving is useless if nobody can find me. So when I touch water, something wakes up. A beacon on my side starts to ping. A sound pulse at 37.5 kilohertz once every second. It's a heartbeat calling out from the dark, saying, I'm down here. For decades, that heartbeat lasted just 30 days. And that number nearly cost the world its most famous mystery. In 2014, a Boeing 777, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished. Search teams didn't know where to look until the days were already burning down. My beacons likely fell silent before anyone arrived. The recorders have never been found. So the rules changed. Now that beacon has to last 90 days, not 30. And large aircraft carry a second, low-frequency beacon that can be heard from far, far further away. MH370 rewrote my design. Chapter 6, the 2-year recovery. Let me show you what it looks like when it works. Air France 447, 2009. An Airbus stalled into the Atlantic in the dead of night. 228 people lost. My beacons died in 30 days. It took nearly 2 years, deep tow sonar and robot submarines to find the debris field. 13,000 feet down, almost 4 kilometers of black water. In 2011, they lifted the memory modules from the seabed. 2 years of pressure and salt water, and every bite was intact. Over a single weekend, investigators read the entire final 2 hours. The stall, the confusion, the truth. That is the whole point of me, not to prevent the crash, to make sure it is never a mystery, to make sure it never happens the same way twice. But what happens when I come back burned, shattered, or soaked? That's where the real magic is, in the lab. A sea-recovered board is never allowed to dry out. Drying crystallizes the salt and eats the circuits. So technicians keep it wet, then rinse it in pure, clean water to wash the salt away before they dare apply power. And if my own electronics are destroyed, but the memory chips are alive, they use a trick called the golden chassis. They lift the surviving chips out of the wreck and drop them into a pristine, identical recorder in the lab and read them as if nothing ever happened. Chapter 7, everything you think you know. Time to open the ones you've heard 100 times and grade them, and I get to be the judge. Myth 1. Why not build the whole plane out of black box material? Here's the beautiful answer. I survive because I'm small. My armour weighs a few kilos on a 200-ton aircraft. Nothing. Scale that armour up to an entire fuselage and the plane is too heavy to ever leave the ground. A plane has to be light enough to fly. I get to be heavy because I'm tiny. Verdict, physics says no. Myth 2. Black boxes are indestructible. False. And I'd never claim otherwise. On September 11th, the 2 recorders in the towers were never recovered. Some crashes exceed even my limits. I am crash survivable. That is a promise, not a boast. Verdict, false. Myth 3. They record video of the cockpit. Today, no. I capture audio and data only. Investigators have pushed for cockpit cameras for over a decade, and pilots' unions have fought it just as hard over privacy. So for now, I listen. I don't watch. Verdict, false, but the fight isn't over. Myth 4. Someone is listening to you the whole flight. No one is. I record onto a loop that erases itself, and no human ever hears it, unless there's an accident. In many countries, the law forbids that audio from being used to punish a crew or from ever being made public. I am a witness, not a spy. Verdict, false. Chapter 8. The recorder that ejects itself. So what happens to me next? Because MH370 proved that sometimes being tough isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be found fast. The first answer already flies on military jets and now on some airliners, like the Airbus A350. A deployable recorder. In a crash, it's fired clear of the tail, and because it floats, it rides on the surface instead of sinking 4 kilometers down. The second answer is to never lose the data at all. Stream it live to the ground, a black box in the cloud. The problem is brutal volume and cost. So for now, it's used only in bursts, triggered when something goes wrong. And after MH370, the world built a global tracking rule called GADSS. An aircraft in distress must now report its position at least once a minute, automatically, with no way for anyone on board to switch it off. So that's me, a fist of memory, wrapped in armour, sitting in the tail, waiting for the worst day, so that day is never wasted. I am the promise that the truth survives, even when nothing else does. I am the only witness that walks out of every crash. If you want to see everything I remember put to the test, watch the deadliest crash in history, where 2 of us on the ground held the answer. Or the one flight that beat me, MH370, the Boeing 777 that vanished from every radar on Earth. I'm the Black Box. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown, and next time, we'll open the ones that solve the impossible.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.